Modern-day Japan was well and flourishing. That is until one day a defensive weapon simply implodes, intentionally or not. A massive explosion takes place right in the middle of a hustling city. But this explosion was still the beginning of the rusty winds that were going to plague the lands of Japan for years to come. The rusty winds that were let loose because of the explosion continue to eat away at everything. Naturally, one's body can also rust until they die. Now this is where things get interesting. People have a substantial misconception about the cause of these rusty winds. They blame and persecute a clan of people dubbed as the Mushroom Keepers. They simply believe that it's the spores of the mushroom that are the cause of their post-apocalyptic reality. Suffice to say, the truth is the opposite. The very thing they fear and scorn is what's needed to stop the rust. A young man named Bisco Akaboshi is also a mushroom guardian. He read the subtle art of not giving a fuck and started to grow mushrooms all over the country. Naturally, people think he's exasperating the situation when in reality he's just trying to prevent the further influx of the rusty winds. But the mob is stupid. A hefty bounty of 800,000 yen is placed on his head and he's dubbed as the man-eating mushroom. Now you must be wondering why the head of a nation-level supposed terrorist is only worth 800,000 yen. Well, that's because you also have to account for deflation. It's a post-apocalyptic society after all. Anyway, the story kicks off with a young man cloaked from head to toe in bandages and with a suspiciously loaded wagon. He's stopped at a prefectural border outpost. They have to do a brief security check because of course they do. Now, as this conversation is getting on with the secretary, there's a wanted poster of Akaboshi Bisco on the wall. He tells them that he's a monk on a journey to a certain city to bury all the bodies that his wagon is hiding. His documents turn out to be fabricated and the security does finally get suspicious, but he talks himself out of it. They want to see what he's hiding in the wagon, but when he tells them the dead bodies, which are also carrying diseases, they decide to let it be. The man gets the green light. Unfortunately, the security guard then notices a bow on his back and realizes that monks don't have bows. That's when they realize who this sketchy man is. It's Bisco Akaboshi, and what he's carrying in that wagon weren't dead bodies. It was just his gigantic pet crab and mentor, Jobby. Bisco shoots a mushroom which instantly grows magnanimous inside and bails with his folks. Meanwhile, in that certain city, there's a hostess club with a handful of beautiful girls who are tired of hearing stories from an old hostess. Though as the story goes on, a girl starts making weird sounds from behind a curtain. She's with a doctor named Milo Nekoyanagi, and as illicit as her moans may be, the young doctor is just doing his job and trying to help the poor girl and other locals with the rusting disease. When he's done for the day, the old hostess appreciates him and even offers one of the girls to please him. Suddenly, all the girls there get very excited as they express their desire to be the one who pleases the doctor. Though the doctor was a tough cookie, he turns them all down and leaves. He then gets some mushrooms from the black market and goes home. There he gets his older sister, who's in a dire situation because of the rusting infection, and then later he once again heads out to continue the grind of searching for a solution to this disease. His sister continues watching the TV, but when she gets the news of Bisco Akaboshi's appearance, she instantly gets up and begins to dress. As it turns out, she's the captain of the Imihama Watch, and it's her duty to ensure the safety of the citizens. Milo was outside and he had gotten confronted by Governor Kurokawa. But before the conversation could go on either way, mushrooms appeared, and the governor was distracted. During this outrage, Bisco exchanges glances with Dr. Milo, and following that, Milo heads back to his house. He sees his sister dressing up to stop Bisco despite her rust infection and tries to stop her, but she gently knocks him out. His face falls right atop her massive balloons. He was out cold. When he finally wakes up, his sister is gone. He was going to get a handle on the new illegal mushrooms he had gotten from the illegal vendor, but that's when the wanted terrorist Bisco Akaboshi simply pops up behind him out of nowhere. That's right, after unleashing massive mushrooms and spreading terror across the city of Imihama, Bisco was now at Dr. Milo's clinic. His master, Jobby, was also in the room, although heavily injured and ill. Bisco gives the doctor a lurker shroom and asks him to quickly heal his mentor. Milo tells him how using mushrooms to synthesize illness is technically a crime, but Bisco replies that he knew he was doing the same thing before he and his mentor showed up. Hearing this, Milo does a thorough analysis of the situation and tells Bisco that the old man will have to be operated on right away or he'll die. Bisco is reluctant at first, but he complies. Unfortunately, before they could follow through with the operation, General Kurokawa's quirky soldiers equipped with bunny masks suddenly show show up outside and commence open fire. Bisco creates a shield using mushrooms and then some distractions so that they can get away. By this time, Milo's sister, Pawu, is inquiring about the situation from her troops. She gets on her motorbike and dashes straight in the supposed direction of this wanted terrorist. The governor, on the other hand, is pestering a young pink-haired mercenary named Tyrol. As it turns out, last night, after Bisco, Jabi, and his crab successfully infiltrated through the border, this mercenary was asked to go and apprehend them. Although she failed, her attack is also the reason behind Jabi's condition. Now she's being rebuked for failing her task. She explains what happened, and then the governor orders his troops to make sure Bisco Akaboshi doesn't survive. By this point, Bisco, Milo, and Jadi have escaped to an underground sewer. As Milo tries to operate on Jadi, Bisco heads out. He once again defeats and captures Tyrol. However, Pawu catches sight of this. She was already informed that the trial she was following was a distraction, as well as the fact that her home was raided. You bet Pawu was furious. Her brother better be okay. She confronts Bisco, both are extraordinarily skilled, but Pawu is being rash and crude. He advises her against moving around so much after taking a look at her infected body, but this only further enrages her. Bisco then tries to explain that he's not a criminal. The mushrooms he spreads aren't the reason behind the rust. In fact, the mushrooms halt its progression by absorbing it. That's how they grow bigger in size. Back at the sewer, Milo was performing a blood transfusion on Jadi, but the old man was well and conscious. He agrees with Milo's concern that even if he survives this now, the rusting won't stop, and so he then also mentions the same information about how the mushrooms absorb the rust. Old Man Jadi also mentions how there should be at least one organism who survives off rust alone. Meanwhile, Pawu is skeptical of Bisco's statement. She tells him that if mushrooms really do what he claims to do, why doesn't he just save Japan from the rust? To which, of course, Bisco declares that he has been doing that all this time. But people like her are always getting in his way. She ignores his claims and continues to accuse him of spreading the rust, but Bisco properly explains that the reason why people think mushrooms spread the rust is just because they grow the most in areas where rust is in abundance. That's the mechanism, and that's why he's looking for the legendary rust-eater mushroom to save his mentor from the rust. Back at the sewer, Jadi continues to talk about the same topic with Milo. Now, Bisco notices the striking resemblance Pawu had with Milo. He quickly deduces that they must be related, and so he tries to provoke her by mentioning the doctor. This drives her insane. She displays steroids level of strength as she aims for Bisco, but unfortunately the man saw right through her attack, rendered her weapon useless using mushrooms, and then proceeded to knock her out. Though as the gentleman he is, he carries her to their hideout. The mentor Jadi has fully recovered. The doctor says it's a miraculous recovery. Bisco thanks Milo for his help, but Milo is confused and wonders why his sister is next to him all knocked out. He explains that she was too strong and was also out for his blood, which is why he used a poison mushroom to temporarily knock her out. They then inject Pawu with the medicine and just leave her be. Jadi tells Bisco that he has to leave the city while he distracts the authorities. Bisco states that he won't go anywhere without him, but the old man exclaims that he's still in no shape to run. Bisco then asks a good question. He asks Jadi that if he ends up finding the rust eater they're all looking for, how will he synthesize it without his help? This is where Jadi looks towards Milo, and surely enough, the young doctor is ready to take on the challenge. He requests Bisco to take him along for the journey. Naturally, Bisco isn't the easiest guy when it comes to compliance, but after seeing the flare in Milo's eyes, the desire to save his sister, Bisco gives in. Jadi sets out to distract the forces while Milo says his goodbyes to his unconscious sister. He puts his bracelet on her hand and leaves some medicine before finally catapulting across the border on a mushroom after another run-in with the forces. Just like that, the duo is on the pursuit of uncovering the whereabouts of the Rust Eater before Jadi and Pawu succumb to the infection, though it looks like Milo is quite excited by the surroundings. As it turns out, this is the first time he's left the city. Shortly after, they come across Bisco's crab named Octagawa. Milo is inept at riding crabs, but through relentless effort, he succeeds. At one instance, Tyrol tries to steal the crab, but she's once again defeated by Bisco. This is like the third or fourth time. Sometime later, when they enter a vacant temple to rest and stay the night, they encounter Tyrol once again. However, this time she's in a quite sorry situation, and isn't in a position to mess with them. She's unable to breathe, and her eye sockets look like they're about to pop out. Milo realizes what's going on and initiates mouth-to-mouth in order to rid her body of the balloon worm. Trust me guys, it looks even weirder than it sounds. Unfortunately, this organism was secretly planted in her by the governor so that she never steps out of line. And since she hasn't gotten her dosage of trying to subdue it, the organism grew several times in size and was supposed to be her death. Tyrol had pretty much warmed up to them by now that they had saved her life. She sells them her supplies that they aren't interested in anything except maybe the biscuits. Next, she throws some expired fuel away, but unexpectedly enough, this causes the building to move on its own. This is where they realize that the temple is built upon the top of a giant mantis shrimp. They then try to stop this rampaging mantis from destroying their route through the mountains, but it does it anyway. Now they have to take another route. When they woke up the following day, Tyrol had already left and so did their money. Basically, she left her supplies with a note saying that she's taken the money as the price of the supplies. Later, Bisco is apprehended by a few kids after he reveals that he has a big bounty on his head. They take him to their ruined town. This is the town named Tetsujin. While Bisco is behind the bars, a sweet little girl explains the situation of their town to Milo, how all the adults are working for General Kurokawa just so they can make enough money to ensure the survival of all the kids who are suffering from the disease. Though, when Milo checks out the situation himself, he explains that they're not suffering from the rusting infection. Rather, it's another disease called shellskin, which is easily curable. He then makes a cure and rids all the kids of this disease. Now both Akaboshi and Milo are in this town. Milo's sister Pau is following their trail. All she wants is to ensure her brother's safety, though she sure doesn't have an easy life. She saves an elderly couple who then turns out to be serial killers, but when they fail to take out the legendary Pau, they simply blow themselves out of existence so they can avoid the consequences of their actions. Seriously, how irresponsible can you be? Back at the town, a school of giant floating blowfishes invade the town. Bisco uses the ruckus as an opportunity to get out of his cage and smoothly stops the invasion of the blowfishes. Milo teaches that sweet girl how to make the medicine, while the leader of the kids gives Bisco the arrow-like weapon his dad gives him as a token of gratitude. Then they leave the town with smiling faces. Subsequently, back at the city of Imihama, the governor realizes that Jabi was pretending to be one of his bunnies. As for Bisco and Milo, they're traversing through a snowy wasteland where they see a familiar face. Yep, it's Tyrol, and this time she has almost frozen to death. Gosh, she just keeps failing those survival checks. The doctor does his things, and the three of them then continue traversing on the giant crab. She then helps them out with some communication with the locals, and they quickly reach the Kitsuneka station. There they come across a rail car, but it requires a yen coin to operate, a yen coin which no longer exists. Thankfully, Tyrol starts using her superb mechanical skills and helps them out with the train as well. While they're still trying to get the train to run, Milo is taking a look into a guidebook when he comes across some information about the Rust Eater. This instantly gets their attention, and they learn that this Rust Eater mushroom can be found on a giant flying pipe snake. Finally, the rail car is ready to go. Milo and Bisco get on it, they bid Tyrol farewell, and also deem her a genuine friend. Naturally, she shares the same sentiment. As they're on their way through the tunnel, they're raided by nasty oil slimes, but they take them out with the crab's help. They eventually come out of the tunnel and right at the edge of a valley. Suddenly, they witness the same giant flying snake that was talked about in the guidebook, though they seemingly have no plan whatsoever when it comes to how to deal with it. To make things more complicated, Pau is finally here on her motorbike. She was going to smack Bisco for taking her brother, but since the giant snake seemed like a more immediate threat, they tried to work together to do something about it, especially since the snake had grabbed her with its weird-looking claws. However, when they managed to free Pau, the snake ends up swallowing both Milo and Bisco. Thankfully, Bisco succeeds in killing the snake from inside its stomach. When they're done, he takes a bite of one of the mushrooms attached to its body, but realizes it's the Rust Eater they're looking for. But unexpectedly, this mushroom reacts with Bisco's Mushroom Keeper blood and gives him the ability to make a serum that can neutralize the rust. Milo rationalizes that the abilities of the Rust Eater mushroom only activate when they come in contact with this blood. The governor Kurokawa appears out of nowhere and takes the snake's body. He also makes sure to shoot Bisco with a special rust bullet. Seeing what went on, Pau finally develops a soft spot for Bisco. In fact, this absolute bombshell of a woman even calls our boy cute, and makes his face turn the same color as his hair. She gets half of the anti-rust serum they had developed and departs for Imihara. She'll use that one to cure Jabi. Even though she herself was also suffering from the disease, she lets Bisco have the other half so that he can treat the effects of that rust bullet. Though unfortunately, when she's back at her base, none of her troops are anywhere to be seen. She comes across one, but he's been turned into a zombie. Furthermore, Jabi is currently at Kurokawa's mercy, and now she was at his mercy as well. The irredeemable governor then broadcasts a video of Pawu getting tortured. Milo ends up seeing the broadcast. He's devastated, but since Bisco was in no shape to go, he puts the guy to sleep and then goes back to save his sister. Once there, he confronts the governor and even attacks him with a poisoned knife. But this is where Kurokawa reveals something very interesting about himself. As it turns out, he also used to be a mushroom keeper, and so he has a strong knowledge when it comes to mushrooms. To make things simple, he was already prepared for the mushroom poison. He defeats Milo using a puppet shroom and then asks him about the secret of the Rust Eater. He also states that the cure for the rusting infection should never get out to the public. The current situation is too profitable for him to let that happen. The situation was not looking good, which is why the protagonist arrives to save the day. But Kurokawa controls Milo's movements and makes him shoot Bisco. He then asks Milo to quickly reveal the secret of the Rust Eater or they'll both die. Milo ends up giving him the information, but it looks like Kurokawa was going to kill them anyway. Thankfully, an arrow is shot through his eyes. It's Jabi. He saves them both and also states that he's freed Pawu. The situation gets pretty complicated, but Bisco and Milo escape thanks to the crab. Milo was in dire need of the medicine. Bisco injects him with some that he had gotten from his sister and then heads out. Later at the Japanese government forces Miyagi base, Jabi is taken to a special facility. This is where the governor shows him a disturbing spectacle. He states that the rust wind isn't potent enough, so they've decided to produce a stronger rust wind using the same kind of Tetsujin weapon. They're also planning on completely destroying the Rust Eater so that there's never any cure to be found. This way they can always have a monopoly on public health. The governor was trying to get Jabi involved in the scheme, though Jabi wasn't a politician. When he tries to punish Jabi, one of the bunnies reveals himself as Bisco. That's right, he was always there disguised as a bunny. He asks his mentor to destroy the cannon while he himself would go after Kurokawa. Unfortunately, in his attempt to take out the governor, Bisco first loses an eye to a rust bullet, then a few fingers, and finally an arm, as he tries to punch the governor. Then he grabs him and jumps straight into the overwhelming liquid lava rust beneath them. Kurokawa dies a pathetic death, but Bisco starts getting consumed by the rust. Milo arrives at the scene and screams, but the damage is already done. Bisco's life force was withering away because of the rust. He throws his bow toward Milo and asks him to take his life before he succumbs to the rust. And as sad as it was, Milo shoots his dear friend while screaming at the top of his lungs. On the outside, Jabi and Pawu manage to keep the cannon from firing any potent rust. They topple the cannon and it self-destructs. The facility itself also could no longer hold itself due to the destruction. When Milo reunites with Jabi and Pawu, he breaks the news of Bisco's death. They were silently mourning, that is, until something emerges from the destroyed facility. It's Tetsujin, and this defensive weapon practically looks like a colossal titan. It instantly shoots a massive load of rust and destroys the source of the Rust Eater mushrooms. It then proceeds to destroy the government forces. Even so, Tetsujin continues to walk while leaving a massive trail of rust, which continues to turn the surroundings into wastelands. Back at the base, Tyrol also hears about the incident. Milo, Jabi, and Pawu get on the crab as they follow the Tetsujin. Milo hypothesizes that it's Kurokawa who transformed into the Tetsujin. Jabi, Milo, and the locals fire arrows at the Titan, but it counters them with massive explosives. Once again, the crab tries to protect them, but the explosion was too much. In an attempt to keep Milo safe, Jabi is heavily injured. Tyrol, on the other hand, encounters Pawu and lets her onto her vehicle. She then explains that she's found the manual of the Tetsujin. Subsequently, since Jabi was heavily injured, Milo leaves him in the hands of the locals and follows Tetsujin. Its destination is Imihama, but the Titan also encounters Tetsujin Town on the way. It's the town with the kids. They all abandon their homes and try to run away while their town is destroyed. Fortunately, Milo's continuous firing of the arrows somewhat slows the Titan's assault. Powu's forces then appear and initiate a full-scale attack using tanks, missiles, and aircrafts. By this time, Tyrol, Pawu, and even Jody show up on a jeep. They're there to help Milo, who just stopped shooting arrows. As dire as the situation, the emotional turmoil was just as real. Milo uses the steroid mushroom to enhance his physical states and then decides to physically attack the Titan. He lands on his body and starts cutting it open. While doing so, he notices Bisco's goggles entrenched in the Titan's body. This kind of gets Milo all emotional. Through this momentary silence on his part gave Kurokawa the opportunity to grab hold of him. The Tetsujin grabs him and throws him straight into the wall. However, the Titan deems him insignificant. That is, until a certain someone emerges from within Tetsujin's body. That's right, folks, it's our boy, Akaboshi Bisco. Bisco expresses his gratitude to Milo for helping him not move on to the next world. He also notices that not only has his body been healed, but he's also exuding mushroom spores. Milo is, of course, genuinely delighted to see his buddy again, but seeing the changes and attack power, he deduces that Bisco is also now a Rust Eater. He's basically half human and half Rust Eater. Now, the man tries to fight the Titan, but it's not easy when your opponent is as big as a Colossus. Thankfully, Tyrol states that Kurakawa must be inside the Iron Mask, and that should be the focus of their attacks. Hearing this, Pawu volunteers to be the one who splits the mask open. In return for the favor, she grabs Bisco's collar, pulls him in, and gives him a quick yet gentle kiss. Our boys finally become a man. Pawu then uses Jabi's help to launch toward Tetsujin's head, and she then proceeds to flawlessly execute her job. We catch a glimpse of the rusted Kurakawa, but Bisco shoots an arrow through his head. This keeps Tetsujin from eventually self-destructing, and the arrow miraculously results in the emergence of Colossus Rust Eater mushrooms all over the place. The mushrooms consume the Tetsujin and also cure both Jabi and Pawu's rusting infection in an instant. As you can expect, these mushrooms are more than enough to properly cure Imihama's populace. The day is saved. In the aftermath, we can see how Pawu becomes the new governor of Imihama and also declares Imihama as a state independent from the Japanese government. The adults of the Tetsujin town also finally return back to their kids. However, after realizing that he may now be practically immortal, Bisco and Milo go beyond the borders once again. Bisco obviously doesn't want to live forever, and he also thinks that the mushrooms that keep popping up all over his body are annoying, which is why the two of them embark on yet another journey. This time their goal is to somehow reverse the effects of the Rust Eater transformation. But that's a story yet to be told, in the anime, at least. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.